I have recently rekindled one of my particular hyperfixations: fighting games. Every year, thousands upon thousands of people tune into competitions like EVO to watch people duke it out in fighting games like Street Fighter and Tekken and Guilty Gear and more. Combatants spend countless hours memorizing combo patterns, mastering the timing of blocks and counterattacks, honing their skills to be the best. There are probably millions of hours of content online talking about which characters are the most high tier, discussing how to counter specific moves in a specific way. Honestly, the entire fighting game fandom subculture is kind of fascinating, and one could spend ages on a single game, let alone the entire fighting game genre. I mean, it's no wonder that people love it so much, when all of this stuff exists. However, that's not exactly why I enjoy most fighting games. In fact, I'll admit I don't even really enjoy playing many fighting games, largely due to the fact that I am really not that good at them. I never play online because I get destroyed too easily, and when I play the computer, I usually end up pausing a lot to remember how to do my combos and special moves. I might be okay enough to win a few matches on the couch with friends, but I am not remotely good enough to truly play fighting games. So, why do I love them? Well, I've said on this channel a time or two dozen that my favorite thing of all in all of my favorite pieces of media is story, world building, history, and lore. Normally, this means I play a lot of RPGs. That genre is practically synonymous with story, world building, history, and lore. Yet, at the exact same time, so are fighting games in a really weird way. Fighting games are defined by their characters. A fighting game with boring, bland, uninterested, recycled characters isn't going to grab anyone, no matter how finely tuned the actual gameplay side of things is. That's why many fighting games like Mortal Kombat, Tekken, Street Fighter, BlazBlue, Killer Instinct, Guilty Gear, SNK, and at least some of the Soul Calibur games spend a lot of time not only making characters interesting and appealing on a visual and gameplay level, but also developing their personalities and backstories. Heck, the whole reason I am a huge fan of comic book superheroes is because I played Injustice when I was a kid and was so enthralled with the stories of these characters that I just had to know more about them. I think fighting game stories and worlds are so good that I would even argue that one of the greatest storylines in the history of video games comes from a fighting game. And no, it's not Tekken or Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter, it's Super Smash Bros. I certainly hope I don't need to introduce Smash Bros. As a concept to you. Unless you've been living under a rock since January of 1999, you should definitely have a passing knowledge of Nintendo's all-star arcade fighter. And over the years, Smash has become basically its own Hall of Fame of video games. I know I might have seriously just ticked off a few fighting game fans by even putting Smash in the same category as other fighting games, but I mean, come on, man, game has to recognize game, and Super Smash Bros. Has game. Now, when I see most people talking about Smash online, they're usually talking about one or two different titles. Ultimate, given the name, is considered by many to be the ultimate Smash experience, with the most characters ever in the franchise, tons of fan favorites, crossovers people have dreamed of for years, and they managed to bring back every single character who had ever been in the game before. The other Smash game people usually talk about is Melee. Again, I'm not skilled enough to fully understand the nuances here, but from what the fans tell me and my own research shows, Melee is widely considered one of the best games for those top-tier fighting game fans, due to having an incredibly high skill ceiling that rewards fast-paced, aggressive maneuvers. Both games are great in their own right, but neither have that story that I mentioned when I was talking about one of the greatest storylines in the history of video games. Melee doesn't even have a real story mode, and Ultimate did make a valiant attempt. I will give you points for trying. Lifelight is an absolute banger, but the actual story of the story mode is only like 5 cutscenes. We can do better than that. In fact, we have done better than that in Super Smash Bros Brawl. I know the Wii iteration of Smash is not the competitively minded player's favorite game in the series, but it is absolutely mine because it has something the others can only dream of. The Subspace Emissary. Let me just play you the first cutscene from the Subspace Emissary. 2 trophies, one of Mario and one of Kirby, fall into the middle of a stadium filled with cheering fans. Peach and Zelda look on and wave at the crowd. The trophies begin to glow, they come to life, and then you pick one of the fighters and the battle begins. This cutscene is great for setting up a few things that are somewhat critical to this story. You see, Smash has 3 great barriers it needs to hurdle in order to make this story happen at all, let alone make it good. The first problem is the fact that all of these characters weren't designed to be in the same story together. I mean, I guess Mario and Kirby kind of have overlapping niches with their cute cartoon fun, but that's straight up Twilight Princess Zelda, one of the, and I mean this literally, not metaphorically, darkest Zelda games of all time. These characters are from vastly different worlds with different lores and wildly different tones, let alone canons. Now, obviously the writers can just say the story isn't canon, and it isn't really, but this cutscene tells the players that without really having to have an outside force remind you of it. The fact that they begin as trophies, literal toys, as well as picking characters from 3 different games, silently communicates to the player, hey, this story isn't the kind where you need to worry too much about the lore of the characters. Having each character here largely act in line with their characterization in their own games, with Peach waving at the crowd and both Mario and Kirby reviving their opponent at the end of the match and shaking hands, tells you that they are going to be acting like the characters you know and love. But the trophy aspect tells you that this is ultimately a different kind of game and universe, and it puts the player at ease just a little bit. This little cutscene and the fight it is tied to tells you just a little bit about how this world works as well. When characters get defeated, they turn into trophies, and trophies can be revived back into characters by giving it a whole slap to the base. It's simple, but important world building that's given to the player right away so you're not left wondering later. The second hurdle Smash needs to clear is the dialogue hurdle. Speaking is generally considered a prerequisite for communication on this earth. Dialogue is the tool stories use to, tell you things. Smash has a problem with dialogue though. There's just the real world logistical issue of writing it and hiring voice actors and translating and all of that, which Nintendo does have the means to do, but that increases development time and cost. 2 things that are already pretty high on a Smash Bros. Game. And B, most of these characters can't speak to begin with. There are 35 different characters in Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Of those, arguably 13 really seem to speak in a lot of their games. Some of them are implied to speak, like Mario's vocalizations in some of the RPGs, but for the most part, these are silent protagonists. How do we have a killer story when most of our characters don't speak? Simple. Just don't have any dialogue. This is one of the reasons I call Subspace Emissary one of the greatest stories in gaming. Somehow, despite the fact that there are no true spoken lines beyond a single Captain Falcon "Come on!" Subspace Emissary manages to have multiple moments of true emotion. I guess spoilers for a game that came out before Obama got elected, but there's a moment where Lucas shows true fear in the face of a terrifying Wario, where Samus shows a level of horror at the treatment of Pikachu, where Rob, a nearly faceless metal machine, demonstrates true empathy towards his robotic brethren. All of this without a single word. It's a masterpiece by the animators who had to get the body language down, the writers who had to come up with how to convey these emotions, the story directors and everyone else on the staff who had to put all these pieces together. Not having dialogue is like telling a painter they can't use brushes. Only a true master can still make a great piece of art when their most basic tools are taken away, and Subspace Emissary did that with its story. It's not just the emotions that they're able to convey with this no dialogue approach that is impressive either. They are also able to get across a lot of the information you need to understand the plot with while saying nothing at the same time. I haven't discussed the actual overall plot much yet, and I will, but just by watching these cutscenes, you are able to put together the basics pretty easily. Take the subspace bombs. I freaking love the subspace bombs. There's something about the design that I find so appealing. I like this sphere that splits open to reveal the payload within. I dream of bombs that are this visually appealing. When the first subspace bomb detonates, it tells you all the things you need to know about how they work. They clearly require the sacrifice of 2 Robs to work, hence the sad robot I mentioned earlier. The explosion is dark in color, which is textbook evil, and there's the fact that the explosion is sucking stuff in like a black hole. That, paired with the explosions lingering, conveys pretty well immediately what these are. Not explosions in the regular sense, but portals drawing everything into subspace. And you didn't need anyone to tell you that. You didn't need a 5-minute sequence of Mario and Fox McCloud listen to Slippy Toad and Samus Aran on the bridge of the Great Fox talk about wormholes and alternate dimensions or anything. You just need to watch the explosion go off. That's all it took. You get more details and specifics as time goes on, but no one has ever had to look at the camera and exposit for a while. You just watch it and you get it, and that's pretty genius. Now I should probably talk about that third hurdle that Smash needs to clear, because it does relate to the overall plot of the game. The villain problem. Stories need an antagonist, someone for our protagonist to be in opposition with. In a game like Smash Bros, that means you need a real villain who can seem like a threat to all of the heroes. With that said, let's look back at that roster again. When we broke down how many could speak, we had to cut out nearly 2/3 of the roster, 22 of the 35 characters. If we broke this roster down to just the bad guys, we are left with 4. 31 characters in Super Smash Bros. Brawl are, on their absolute worst day, morally gray. This is a serious problem. You have to give the heroes someone to fight or there isn't a story, but only 4 bad guys makes things kinda difficult. They don't even use Wolf for the main plot either, which whittles us down to 3. It would be impossibly boring to just fight these 3 guys over and over and over again. I mean, you could make some of the heroes work with the bad guys, but they need motives to do so, and I'm sorry, you'll never be able to convince me that Ice Climbers would have a reason to side with Ganondorf. Other fighting games solve this in a couple of interesting ways. Take Injustice for an example. Not only does it have a significantly larger roster of villains to fight, it also tailored the story to bring the heroes into conflict with one another. There were multiverse shenanigans, and heroes who end up doing villain things were given reasons why they switched sides. Smash kinda can't do this because of the wahoo nature of its protagonists. So, what's the solution? Simple. Just get some new villains. Our old ones still show up as minions of the new big bad, but the central plot revolves a new threat, the armies of subspace. You see, after that intro fight with Mario and Kirby, dark clouds cover the stadium and the battleship Hailbird appears, dropping these shadow particles on our heroes that manifest into Primids, the foot soldiers of our enemy force. I know these guys look kinda doofy, but the way they manifest themselves was legitimately creepy when I was a kid, and they have a few moments like that throughout the game. They also highlight one of the benefits that Smash Bros. Has over its other fighting game contemporaries. Because Smash is an arcade fighter with a lot more jumping and platforming than your traditional side-by-side fighter, Nintendo could modify the gameplay enough to incorporate actual levels. One of the greatest weaknesses of fighting game stories in Mortal Kombat, just to use an example, is the fact that they often have to force the story into these one-on-one matchups to make the story work with the gameplay. Smash can have actual levels full of throwaway enemies to fight and dispatch. This makes each individual character feel more powerful and competent, giving them something they can legitimately accomplish, while also demonstrating the threat the invading army poses. In order to make the enemies even more threatening, Subspace Emissary also includes a number of boss fights, which again makes the enemies seem more powerful, while also giving a great sense of catharsis for the player when defeating them. The first is Petey Piranha, who kidnaps Peach and Zelda. As a little fun fact, whichever cage you kill first will be the princess who escapes, and the other will be captured. It doesn't change much of the ultimate outcome, but it's a neat little way of giving the player a bit of agency. While there are a couple of recognizable bosses, namely Porky, Ridley, and Rayquaza, the latter of which has a hilarious moment where he nearly eats Diddy Kong, most of the bosses are Smash Bros originals, and I love their designs. Honestly, all of the enemies this game has have this really unique style to them that sticks out in my mind. While some of them are kind of fun and goofy, a lot of them live in this state of just creepy enough to make them really stand out. On paper, the story actually isn't too complex. This army of darkness, led by what appears to be Master Hand, is detonating these subspace bombs all over the place to submerge the entire world in the darkness of subspace. Another neat thing it does, though, is that it managed to give each of our characters a more specific reason to fight, such as Diddy originally fighting to get his banana horde back with DK, turning into a rescue mission for his best pal. Pit is tasked by Palutena to fight the threat, Samus is originally infiltrating the bad guy HQ to retrieve her stolen power armor, Meta Knight is trying to take back the battleship Hailbird, Mr. Game & Watch and Pikachu are being kept as slaves by the bad guys. Now sure, a couple of fighters do just seem to be along for the ride, like Yoshi and Ice Climbers, but most of them are given fairly compelling motives. Lucas even gets a whole little character arc about facing his fears, and his cowardice originally leading to Ness's capture, but he eventually puts it all on the line to save Pokemon Trainer's life from Gallium's suicide attack, which is impressive, not only because of the whole no dialogue thing, but also because this is a character no one in America had legally ever met before. There's all sorts of epic battles and moments just like that though. Fox rescuing Diddy Kong from Rayquaza, Meta Knight getting into accidental fights with everyone he meets before becoming friends with them, Lucario being one of the only people in the entire multiverse who has ever seen through Solid Snake's cardboard box disguise, the battleship Hailbird with a defeated Great Fox chained to it flying through the sky, and the United Hero Squadron taking down the subspace cannon with Kirby's Dragoon. That isn't even everything. Again, it has no dialogue, but it has a lot of hype moments. All of this eventually leads to the big reveal. When Ganondorf meets his master, Master Hand, in subspace, he discovers that Master Hand is being puppeted by another enemy, Taboo. The two try to attack Taboo, who easily rebuffs them. I always liked seeing Master Hand like this. He was only ever just a boss before this, with no real characterization of any kind. But the way his glove has been bloodied by Taboo's chains, and the way he tried to fight back, made a giant sentient hand feel like a real character. When our heroes finally get to Taboo, he summons his butterfly wings of death and instantly one-shots the entire hero party, all dead in one move. It's at this time I want to talk about something that elevates the Subspace Emissary into what I would call a truly good story: the theming. Like basically all literary analysis, parts of this are definitely up to interpretation and can be argued about, but I think my breakdown does make some sense. Taboo, as a villain, is kind of fascinating. He's huge and powerful, and we know basically nothing about him. From what we see in the game and what we learn from some very old posts on the internet, Taboo cannot leave subspace. This is part of the reason he was using the subspace bombs, to suck the entire world into his domain. The old Smash Bros website claims that this was done to absorb the powers of the fighters, but I believe there's something greater to it than that, a literary explanation. Way back in 1999, in the original Smash Bros game, the game opens with Master Hand animating a series of dolls, bringing them to life to do battle on what appears to be a child's desk. A desk that transforms into a battle arena of familiar characters. There's whimsy here, childlike fun at that. Yeah, the characters are fighting, but they aren't malicious. They fight because they are toys of a child who likes to imagine his favorite characters doing battle. In Melee, the dolls got switched out to figures on trophy plinths. They are still technically toys, but they are a bit more mature. They're a collector's item now, not just a simple plaything. The whimsy of this world has grown up just a little bit. Then Brawl comes out. It's been 9 years in our own world since that first time Master Hand played with those dolls. If a child was playing with them then, that child would now be pushing adulthood, if not already there depending on age. They'd have to start thinking about more serious things. Their future, their career, their boyfriend or girlfriend, the future family, and more. They'd have to knuckle down, focus on things that are more important than toys and games and imagination. And that could be rough for some people. It might leave them feeling sad, dejected, and empty. Like you're surrounded by a world of darkness that you can never leave. I mean, yeah, we all have to grow up sometime, but what do we become when the whimsy in our hearts dies out? Now look again at Taboo. Look at his standard pose. His arms are pulled close to him. He stares forward, not blinking or moving. He only ever leaves this pose to launch an attack. Taboo is the undisputed ruler of subspace. He's the king of a world of nothing. Master Hand, the master of the toy world, is beaten by him, broken by him, quite literally made to bleed by him. Even his name, Taboo, something that is off limits or inappropriate. Like an adult with adult responsibilities, adult duties, spending his time daydreaming about children's toys. I think Taboo represents what happens when you cut yourself off from the joy and whimsy of life. To him, the only purpose of the world of trophies is to become fuel for his power. In real life, some people become jaded and cynical. They become incapable of seeing the simple joys available in life. A toy can seem wasteful. That money could be spent on something better that could have gone fuel some other ambition. They might have spent their days looking forward, dead in the eyes, just like Taboo, still moving, but with no real life left in them. Yet that darkness can be defeated with the simple joy of something like toys and games and heroes and villains. And the sheer fact that I can make that level of literary breakdown of a frickin' Smash Bros game is why I think Subspace Emissary ranks among the greatest stories ever told by a video game. Anyway, I don't really know how to end this, so I guess like the video, share it with your friends, comment below if you liked it, if you have any thoughts, and you know what, I'll see you in the next one. Until then, bye.